Kansas City, and Kansas City is not known for a lot of things, but it's proud of its barbecue. It takes its barbecue very seriously. So seriously that our baby formula comes in mild, medium, and hot. Now that is serious barbecue. I talked to a naturalization ceremony a few years ago, and that is an incredible event. If you ever have a chance to go to a naturalization ceremony where people swear to become new citizens, you've got to go. I had a little fun when I spoke to it. I had the top 10 things that make America great. And it was a silly list like David Letterman did. Like, you can spell our tennis players' names, and pizza in 30 minutes or it's free. And this was back in the Clinton years, so the last one was a news media that takes an active interest in your love life. But in between, the great thing about it was, in between every one of those things, I commanded this group from all around the world, different colored faces, different accents, to chant, "Is this a great country or what?" And that was a great experience for everybody involved. I'd like to do 4 things for you tonight. I'd like to tell you 2 of the coolest stories you'll ever hear, guaranteed. I'd like to get you even more excited about this country, more appreciative of it. I'd like to prove to you, without a doubt, that one person can make a difference. And I'd like to inspire you to become that person. But first, before I get to that, I'd like to ask you to all stand, because I want to show you something really important. What I'm showing you is that when you have a microphone, you can make people do a lot of things. That's what I'm showing you. All right, look around you. Look at the people next to you. And think about this fact. You represent all the people who have ever lived on this planet, all right? This is everybody that's ever lived right here in this room. Now, everybody sit down except for you. I want you to keep standing, please. This young lady represents everybody who has ever lived free on this planet. You see the difference? Huge difference. You can sit down, thank you very much. You've got to see that to believe it. There are estimates that 2, 3, 4% of everybody that's ever lived has lived as free as us. Does that make you appreciate this country a little bit? I hope so. I want to tell you about, we've all heard the story of a baby being left on a porch. I actually knew about one. There was a baby left on a porch here in Augusta. And I went to that baby's funeral a couple years ago. But the cool part is, he was 92 years old. And at that funeral was everybody who was anybody in this town. His name was Brian Mulharen. He was 92 years old. And I knew this guy, and he was a wonderful, wonderful man. But he so touched this town that everybody wanted to be at that funeral. Now think about where he started and where he ended up. He started abandoned on a porch. He ended up with everybody who was anybody at his funeral. You think he made a difference in this town? Let me tell you about another guy who I know who made a difference. His name is Gregory Watson. Does anybody know who Gregory Watson is? Great, you're playing right into my hands. Gregory Watson was a student at the University of Texas in the early 1980s. He was given an assignment to write a paper on the Constitution. And he was doing some research. He thought he'd do something about the Equal Rights Amendment because it was hot at the time. But he found this amendment in a book. And he thought, that sounds pretty cool. So he did the paper on that amendment. He got a C on the paper. Really ticked him off. I mean, the guy was mad. And he holds a grudge. This is before free long distance. This is before email. In his little dank apartment in Austin, Texas, he starts writing letters to legislators all across the country, telling them about this amendment. And in 1992, it was ratified as the 27th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And if you're interested in what it says, basically it says that Congress cannot vote itself a pay raise. If they vote to increase congressional pay, it doesn't go into effect until after the next election. Presumably, some other member of Congress would get that. That works. This is a man who got a C on a paper about this amendment, and he got it ratified. I kid you not. It's a true story, and it happened in my lifetime. This amendment, and the story behind this amendment is incredible. This amendment was proposed by James Madison. It was one of the initial 12 Bill of Rights. You know them today as the 10 Bill of Rights. There's a scene in History of the World Part 1 by Mel Brooks, a silly movie. He's doing Moses coming down off the mountain. And he's got these 3 tablets, and he says, I give you these 15, and he drops them on them. These 10 commandments. This is what happened with our Bill of Rights. There were 12 originally. Only 10 got ratified. But this James Madison one about congressional pay, it sat there. It got ratified by a few states, but it sat there for several centuries. And occasionally Congress would do something that ticked off a state, and they'd fire off a ratification of this amendment. But nobody was really paying attention to how many had done it. It takes 3/4 until this guy got a hold of it, and he got it passed. Now, have I made my case that one person can make a difference in this world? That's an incredible story, and that happened in this country. You don't have to get a constitutional amendment passed to make a difference. Although, if you're thinking about it, I've got some ideas up here after I'm done. You can make a difference, though, and I want you to try. You need to. This country needs you to make a difference. I'm telling you that. As a matter of experience, we need you. This country is more divided than I've ever seen it in my lifetime, and probably more divided than we've been since the Civil War. I think you can see that in your lives. You see that in the news media. I think it's gotten so critical that our civic infrastructure is crumbling, and we need to rebuild it. Now, by civic infrastructure, I mean 5 things. Number 1 in our civic infrastructure is a knowledge of our system of government. We got to know how this thing works. No, we don't have a king, we have a dictator or a potentate to tell us what to do. We are self-governed in this country. We have got to know how the system works, or it doesn't work. That's number 1. Number 2, we have to be informed and involved citizens for this to work. Number 3, we have civic clubs and other selfless organizations that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting in this country. It's something that de Tocqueville noticed when he toured America, the Frenchman who thought so much of America. And he told the world about America's penchant for forming associations. Civic clubs and other organizations really do a lot for this country. Number 4 is a sense of brotherhood, our spirituality, comradeship. We've got to get back to there. We've got to be civil again to each other. And number 5 is the family. The family is arguably the foundation for all of civilization. These are the 5 pillars of our American civic infrastructure. And I think they need some work, wouldn't you think? Well, let me give you some stats to prove it. A few years ago, it was learned that 20 to 25% of American high schoolers are proficient in civics and U.S. history. That means 75 to 80 aren't. That's a big problem. In a survey of the general population, 37% of Americans couldn't name even one of the freedoms, the 5 freedoms in the First Amendment. 37% couldn't name even one. 33% couldn't name one of the 3 branches of government. Now, we all agreed that we need to know how this thing works for this to work. That's kind of scary, don't you think? People don't know how this thing works. I can tell you that I had a really boring civics teacher, so I get excused from this. But I have learned through my work how important this all is and how deficient we are as a population in understanding how our system works. As far as being informed, have you all seen the videos, a lot of them from Jimmy Kimmel and people like that on the internet, asking people on the street just basic questions about American history and American civics and how really ignorant people are? It's funny, but it's kind of scary too, don't you think? Well, we need to work on our civic infrastructure. I'd like to say just a couple things about how we got here, because it's largely my generation's fault. The generation that won World War II and formed those organizations that Gary was talking about have handed off a ball that the baby boomers have kind of dropped. A lot of things happened in the 1960s to help that along. I mean, basically, it's my argument that our civic infrastructure has been crumbling since the 1960s, so about half a century. The Vietnam War, as you all know, was very divisive. We had terrible assassinations during the decade of the 60s. We, of course, had struggles for civil rights and for women. We had all kinds of civil strife in the streets. So there were a lot of factors going on that kind of started eroding our civic infrastructure in the 60s. There were some trends too, and I'm going to take my jacket off real quick. There were some trends that really took hold in the 1960s that have served since then to erode our civic infrastructure. A couple of them are TV and air conditioning. Now, I'm not going to give that up, but TV and air conditioning draws people into their houses, separates people. I mean, it's very easy anymore to work in a cubicle, drive home, press the garage door, open, close, go in, spend the rest of the evening in front of the TV or the computer. Social interaction's kind of gone by the wayside a lot of times. So that really didn't help. More recent trends have included materialism, and I mean, you've seen all the fights on Black Friday. And what I would argue is an overemphasis, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, in the schools on America's warts. Now, we need to be honest about our faults. And I will tell you, quite honestly, that I know that I was fed a very romanticized version of American history. I know. We dressed up as pilgrims, we did all that stuff. But I think we've swung too far the other way. And I think we need to really stress the good things about America. And we talked about them earlier, along with our warts. And I don't think we're doing that enough. So those are some of the things that I think have eroded our civic infrastructure. I became significantly concerned about this a few years ago, and so I wrote a little booklet that I call What You Can Do for Your Country. And it started off as about 225 things that I thought we could all do to help save this country. And so I'm kind of pitching that around. And I had a friend, she's here tonight, her name is Heather, come up to me and say, you know, we really ought to do something more than just put this out. We ought to get it out there, and we ought to tell this story about what we need to do as a country, what we need to do as citizens. So Heather and I have formed a website called yourule.life. You Rule, YOURULE.life. And we're blogging, we're doing videos. Heather is a real expert at the Federalist Papers, which is really cool stuff. The Federalist Papers are basically editorials in colonial times to explain and argue for the benefits of the Constitution. Is that fair summation? So we're doing all this because we care about the country, we're worried about it, we want to hand it off in better shape than we're doing now as a generation. And we really want to inspire a national dialogue. We want to coalesce the movement around what I'm calling the 5 C's that I think we need to utilize to rebuild our civic infrastructure. And the 5 C's are civics, citizenship, civility, the Constitution, and character. It's civics, citizenship, civility, the Constitution, and character. And I go back to the Constitution a lot because that's really kind of our blueprint. That's our, that's the country's business plan. A smart business has a business plan. And when they have questions about what they should be doing, they go back to the business plan to see, does this activity fit with our business plan? Does this get us to the vision that we had in our business plan? That's what our Constitution is. This is the country's business plan, and we need to refer to it. So, I hope I've proven the case that we need your involvement and that you can make a difference. I mean, for Pete's sake, a baby on the porch, a guy with a seed paper. You want to know the really cool epilogue to that Constitution story? Last year, and remember, this was the early 80s when he did this effort to get the Constitution amended. Last year, they got him up on stage and they changed his grade from a C to an A on his paper and in the class. That's cool. Let me leave you with something that was said by a Revolutionary War patriot, Joseph Warren, to his compatriots, who at the time didn't know whether they would win the war. And if they didn't, they knew they were in trouble. They weren't going to last. And he told them this: on you depend the fortunes of America. You are to decide the important question on which rests the happiness and liberty of millions yet unborn. Act worthy of yourselves. Think about that. Act worthy of yourselves. Thank you very much.